Greetings, true believers. This is Lord Deathman, your host for the Podcast of Champions, and I'm rising from the grave once again to guide you through the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga. Today, we're going to be kicking off the journey with the film that started it all, 2008's Iron Man. Before we suit up, a quick word of caution spoilers do lie ahead. So if you haven't seen Iron Man yet, and God knows we wouldn't understand why, pause this podcast, go watch the movie, and then come back. I promise we'll be waiting. It's been a long time since I've moderated, but I'm here, hopefully with renewed vigor and insight. And I'm also being joined today by four intrepid souls who are on the panel, and I'm going to introduce them right now. Starting with the fan with no fear, Taylor, how are you doing today?
I am a true believer.
Outstanding. Merv, are you ready to break down this slice of pop culture?
Ready and willing.
Outstanding, sir. Thank you. And Grandmaster, Master of Ceremonies, how about you? How are you doing today?
I'm all suited up and ready to fly.
Outstanding. And last but certainly not least, bringing just a touch of feminine energy to the panel, to the podcast, we have Loki's mom. How are you doing today?
Doing really good.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Before we get into the conversation proper, I do have to do some shameless promos. You can reach out to us on all of the popular social media platforms like Facebook, X, Instagram, and right here on YouTube. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the channel. That's very important to us. And also, if you're looking for a permanent home in fandom, you can check us out on our awesome message board, sakar.freeforums.net. That's sakar.freeforums.net. So let's go ahead and power up the arc reactors and really blast off into the world of Tony Stark. And yes, I am going to continue to do that throughout the podcast. There will be Iron Man style puns. So let's get used to it. I want to call on the champions to start with some quick reactions to the 2008 film. But before we dive in, and I do ask the audience to indulge me here in just a little recitation of some of this 2008's film's accomplishments. So, Iron Man 2008 grossed $585 million at the worldwide box office. It was the eighth highest grossing film of 2008. It made $98.6 million on its first opening weekend. I say all that to say that that's even impressive by today's standards for a Marvel movie. That's a little tricky even for modern day films like our recent outing with Captain America, uh, Brave New World. It received two Academy Award nominations, one for sound editing and another for visual effects. It won Best Science Fiction Film at the Saturn Awards, including a Best Actor Award at that same ceremony for Robert Downey Jr. and a Best Director Award for Mr. Jon Favreau. So there's no shortage of accolades that you can discuss when talking about this film. It revolutionized superhero filmmaking, or at least brought it into the modern age. I think we could say that. And it also resuscitated the flagging career of Mr. Downey Jr., as well as, I think, bringing more attention to a little known director by the name of Jon Favreau, who has disappeared into obscurity since the making of Iron Man. We don't know what actually happened to him, but we hope he's doing well in his career. So I say all that to say, just to kind of level set the discussion. So when you're thinking about your initial reactions panel to Iron Man, keep some of those points in mind. I want to start with you, Grandmaster. What was your overall impression of the film Iron Man?
Well, let me start by I think that John Favreau is very happy. Um, um, but Iron Man, yeah, I love that movie. It's great. Um, it, it it was a well-made movie. It redeemed Robert Downey Jr. like it. Well, Tony Stark got some redemption in the movie, which we will dive deeper into. I just love that movie. It's not my favorite Iron Man movie, but I do love this movie.
Okay. And not to linger here with you just for a moment, but is there one aspect of the movie that really sold you on the concept of the MCU or the character of Tony Stark? Was it the visual effects? Was it acting? Was it the humor? Or was it just a mix of all of this stuff that brought you in?
Well, um, I saw Iron Man after I saw the Avengers. So I was not in to the MCU until I saw the Avengers. So I caught up. It was for me a catch-up movie.
Okay.
So I had to catch up on the MCU, and Iron Man was one of my favorite movies when I did. Together with the first Avenger, Captain America, the first Avenger, and yeah, I have a soft spot for the Incredible Hulk, as you all know. But uh, yeah, for me, that was not an aspect. When it comes to Tony Stark or the character of Iron Man, yeah, he just looks cool. He does cool stuff. He's funny. Yeah, he's everything every man wants to be, basically. So yeah, of course that appeals. So yeah,
Yeah, and you're right. He is everything every man wants to be, and unapologetically so.
yeah.
A very flawed character, a very deep character, but also a very charming and endearing character. But we
Well,
will deep dive.
that's what I like about Marvel in general. That the characters are usually flawed. There are no perfect god-like characters in the MCU, and Tony Stark is certainly one of them.
Indeed, indeed. Moving along with the panel on to Taylor. I want to get your quick impressions of Iron Man. How did you feel about that film when you first saw it, and has anything changed between now and 2008?
Well, in 2008, we were at a tipping point. There had been an explosion of genre entertainment, and especially superhero specifically entertainment, starting in the mid 1990s by Sam Raimi and his work on television. And then in 2002, again, Sam Raimi took it up to another level with the Spider Man trilogy. And then in 2008, Marvel Studios started making actual movies, as the name implies, with Iron Man, and they have caused an explosion not just in the superhero genre, but in the entire movie and television industry that we are still living in today, however many years later it is. I was lucky enough to see Iron Man a few days early at an early screening. I believe I saw it on the Tuesday prior to its wide release on that Friday. I was looking forward to it. Iron Man had always been my favorite superhero. I was dying to see him in live action for the first time, especially at a time where now the technology existed to do it right. But even with that, I was completely blown away by the movie. Not just the visuals, first of all. I mean, the way that that suit looks so real on screen and so
Yeah,
believable and so grounded is to this day it still looks perfect. And then the execution of it all, the unapologetically recreating the comics, the original comics, um, and adapting all the different eras of the comics going forward to create this, you know, a perfect cinematic, I don't know what even to call it, a compendium of this character, the perfect cinematic version of this character.
yeah,
And of course, it blew, superhero fans were blown away. I remember going into this, a lot of superhero fans, people who love the comics, love the superhero movies, were saying, Iron Man, I mean, that's not really going to work, is it? I mean, and we'd seen a few stumbles at that point too of people trying to capture Spider-Man's uh, Spider-Man's popularity and magic, and not quite getting there. I won't name names, you know which movies I'm talking about. So a lot of people were worried about Iron Man, but I don't think anyone was not convinced uh, after walking when they walked out of that theater.
yeah, yeah. Amen to that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And thank you for that commentary. Moving on to Merv. I want to share an anecdote with you, Merv. I recently became aware of an attempt to bootstrap the MCU that occurred during the 70s. Now, a little bit before my time, they tried to make a Doctor Strange film. They tried to make a Daredevil film. They even attempted an Iron Man. Like somebody designed a suit and they were going to do like an hour-long TV special on Iron Man. I say all that to say that before Iron Man, I think it would be easy to forget that with the exception of maybe Spider-Man and Blade, Marvel didn't have a lot of home runs in the theaters for these characters. Like, like we were watching Man Thing, right? Like, like this is just hilariously funny. So I want you to talk a little bit about your impressions about what you might have expected before seeing Iron Man, and then how you felt when you actually saw it. You know, like were your expectations in the basement, or were you like, oh, okay, now this is Iron Man's moment? Like my expectations are really high, and then what was the reality of that?
So I'll preface this by saying that my own personal expectations were a little bit skewed because I had started reading the comics a few years beforehand. So right around the time that like the in comics Civil War was going on, where Iron Man was a pretty big part of.
Yeah.
So I was a little more familiar with that character from that than anything else. There was a cartoon that was around when I was a kid, so but I never really watched that. You know, he might have showed up in like the animated Spider-Man cartoon from when I was a kid, so he was like a peripheral superhero. It was like Batman, Spider-Man, the X-Men, like these were all household names with like me and my friends, but like Iron Man was like, "Oh yeah, he's that guy over there in the big metal suit." You know, he's kind of like Batman, but he wears just a rocket suit. He's like the Rocketeer. You know, that's kind of
Right.
where my kind of trajectory was. However, when you start reading the comics, there's obviously every character has decades worth of background in the comics. So I had kind of gotten a little bit more up to date on what to expect. Um, but I was probably the only one. You know, I remember going to the theater and people being like, "What's this? What's this movie?" You know, it's a superhero movie. It's a new one, and at that time, like Taylor said, like it was getting a little spotty. I mean, we had for every like X-Men 2, there was or every X2, there was an X-Men The Last Stand. You know, there was a
Right.
Ghost Rider, there was Elektra, there was Catwoman. Like these were all major
Yeah.
motion
Yeah.
pictures superhero films that were not well received, and it was like, maybe this genre is kind of we've done everything we can outside of like hitting a realistic Batman movie, which was still popular at the time, but and they're still popular now 20 years later. But
Yeah.
I think this movie kind of showed everyone what could be. And I think it helps a lot that Iron Man is so close to reality. You know, we didn't jump right out into space with the Nova Corps or anything like that. We
Yeah.
we took baby steps first. And I think Iron Man is like the perfect baby step for what became the foundation of the MCU, because you don't have to suspend too much disbelief to see this story. You know what I mean? It's still pretty based in reality at this point. And I think that goes a long way and really lets the characters drive home the narrative, which when you've got someone cast as perfectly as Robert Downey Jr., you just
Yeah.
let him work, and
Yeah.
he set the bar at the roof basically. So yeah, I think expectations were a little bit raised by comics, but knowing that the casting of specifically Robert Downey Jr. and like his background and how there's kind of similar backgrounds to the character of Tony Stark felt like a well chosen casting at the time. And obviously now you look back and you're like, it is about as perfect casting for a character as you could even imagine. But at the
Right.
time, even people were still, very
We were
very
doubting it.
confident on it.
We yeah, yeah, we were. I was like, is
I
he
mean,
gonna
confident,
get
but like,
into a there's this SNL skit that Downey did when he was younger where he got into a suitcase. So I was like, is he going to get into a suitcase in this movie, or is he going to take a suit of armor out of it? Either way,
yeah,
we could be in trouble, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if he woulda, let's just, say if he woulda, like, relapsed and gone back to old habits, like, this thing coulda tanked the entire MCU, the moment it got running, but, it didn't, and it became the foundation for what became, what, a thirty movie and several TV series,
Yeah,
universe ahead of it, so, just a great
indeed.
movie.
Yeah, yeah. You have, as always, you've done an impressive job of deep diving into this movie's cultural relevance. Let's save some for the deep dive, though, and
I'm
I
just
am
glad you can
going to.
hear me.
Yes. Inside joke for the audience, guys. We had some technical issues, which we were able to overcome a little earlier today. But moving on to our most beloved and favorite of panelists, who's always bringing wit, grace, sagacity, wonderful feminine energy to the discussion. Lokismom, I want to talk to you, and I want to set the stage a little bit. A war profiteer who's handsome and has a very well manicured mustache, gets up one morning and designs a personal combat system with an incredible array of directed energy weapons and micro munitions. Like, did you think that that was going to work? That Robert Downey Jr., of all people, was going to get into a business suit and then somehow transition into a suit of armor, and we were going to have a hit film? Or did you have your doubts?
Well, I always loved Robert Downey Jr. I was a fan of his when he first came out as a young man and quite young. And of course, he went through a bit of a rough patch there for a while and he came out the other side of it. I think he had already been making some movies and whatnot before Iron Man, but um, that's why I went to go see the movie, not because it was a Marvel movie. As been pointed out, there are lots of uh, comic book movies that had been coming out for decades, really, and some of them I enjoyed. The really good ones, the quality ones, I would always appreciate. But for the most part, I wouldn't follow them. The X-Men had already came out. I think I may have seen the first one, just because Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen was in it. But beyond that, I just really, I was kind of in the Martin Scorsese camp that it was, well, this is, it's amusement park rides. That's all it is. It's not cinema. And well, I went to go see the movie just not because I thought it was going to be great cinema, but because I wanted to see Bobby act again. And boy, was I transformed by that film because, as you pointed out, it really, as everyone's has pointed out so far, it was really well done. The cheek, the wit, um, everything that went into it. I think it goes beyond what kids and young adults maybe would find entertaining. I think there was a lot of stuff there for people like me, older folks who, even then, I was already in my whatever 40s or 50, even 50s maybe by then. But yeah, it just everything about it I really loved, and like I say, it was well done and it had a tremendous amount of heart in it and soul, and I really appreciate it for that. And then that's what really got me into the whole Marvel MCU saga universe that we're
Yeah, yeah.
enjoying right now.
Yeah, I remember those 80s films that Downey Jr. was in. He always played that weird kid, with the
Yeah,
spiked or moosed hair, too much product in his hair, that wanted to tell one too many jokes,
yeah,
the eccentric best friend. I'm like, is this guy really going to play Iron Man?
yeah. He was the Brat Packer. He was, you think of him with Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
and it's
these are
hard to
the
know if
information.
like he really was a member of the Brat Pack or if he was just like peripheral to the Brat Pack. I
It's
don't remember,
in that generation, yeah.
Yeah. But thank you so much for taking us through your quick impressions on the film. Now I want to do a deep dive and talk, some specific topics. Again, this movie really had deep cultural impact. It even managed to survive being toe to toe, neck and neck with 2008's other movie about a rich guy who gets dressed up in a thematic costume and does his thing with a cape. Yeah, who I don't remember that character or who directed the film, who starred in it. Anybody? Uh, anyway,
The spirit, is that the spirit?
could have been the
Spirit. Oh
spirit.
yeah,
Could have been the
Spirit
spirit.
was good.
Yeah, the shadow. Yeah, I heard that it was a great episode, an extended episode of Law and Order.
Oh,
Uh, uh,
I thought it was the Joker movie.
right. It could have been. It could have been a movie about a clown who goes
Yeah,
to court. or did we have that movie pretty recently?
I don't
Uh,
know.
and,
I'm confused.
yeah, so I'm circling back to you, Grandmaster. Really, this film kind of invented the post-credit scene. It reinvigorates Downey Jr.'s career. It brings groundbreaking visual effects from Industrial Light and Magic. They spent months studying skydivers to create realistic aerial movements for this film. And I hear behind the scenes, I'm not an insider, that a lot of what happened on set ended up being improvised because people were just so disorganized and didn't quite have the confidence that they needed to feel like this was going to work. Yet we got this wonderfully imaginative product. Do you dare step up to the podium and try to tell folks at home what made this work so well? How did it happen?
Um, I don't know. I actually really don't know. I think it's just the love that the people who made the film have for the source material. It's Marvel Studios. Kevin Feige. He wasn't head of the studio back then, but he was, of course, an executive producer on the film. John Favreau. Um, they had to make it work because if it didn't, they were in trouble. So yeah, it had to work, and like Taylor said, they just recreated the character in the way it was supposed to be, and it worked. And they reinvented the character a little bit by
Yeah,
modernizing it. Uh, but I like the homage they did to the Mark One suit. Um, uh, they did that very well, very realistically. Um I, yeah, there's so many aspects of this movie that I love. I mean, Tony Stark's redemption in his realization. Hey, the bad guys are using my weapons too. Am I making money out of that? Is
right,
that okay? And then he decides, no, that's not okay. I'm going to use my weapons to do good. And yeah,
right.
and
Yeah,
uh, and the action scenes, they are all great. That scene in Golmira, the town in Afghanistan, I love that scene where he just takes out all the terrorists. Um, this feels right, and of course, who can forget that iconic scene where he just fires the missile on the tank where it explodes, and then he turns around and walks away. I mean, that's so iconic. I mean, and then after all that, and you get like, I didn't care so much for the end fight, but that's a thing that, that that happens to me more often in the MCU recently, actually, uh, with Captain America: Brave New World. But it's usually the hero going against his dark copy, basically. That's true for a lot of superhero films, of course. And then after all said and done, you get, if you are patient enough to stay through the credits, you get a reward beyond
yeah,
any reward ever given in a post-credit scene. Before and after. I mean, I'm here to talk about the Avengers Initiative. Uh, you immediately know, hey, something great is coming. Like I said before, I saw the Avengers before I saw Iron Man. So, but I can only imagine how great that must have been if you saw that in 2008 in the theaters, and the excitement you must have felt. Whoa, we're getting an Avengers film. Whoa,
yeah,
that must have been so great to feel that and get that energy from, and it makes you so invested into the MCU, I guess. Uh, so yeah, from start to finish, I don't know how they did it, but it's a great movie. I cannot fault it. Like I say, it's not my favorite Iron Man movie. It's not my favorite MCU movie. I cannot criticize it at all. Actually, um, the only thing that I think is like, hmm, meh, is that one joke where the kid is sitting in the wheel and then the ice cream falls from the cone. I felt like that. You know what?
right,
Come
right.
on. I mean, you see something fly, but that doesn't mean your ice cream cone sees the too. But anyway, it's weird. So, but that's the only thing that I was like, man, that should not be in the movie. The rest is perfect, and uh, I don't feel sorry for Terrence Howard, but I do think about him a lot.
I think a lot of us think about Terrence Howard, especially when we're just with trying to think about math, you know,
Mm.
and algebra. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'll leave Terrence alone. Thank you for bringing us this wisdom on the panel today, Grandmaster. I'm going to turn to you, Merv, and I like to do this setting the stage, right? So you've got Spider-Man, and that's being owned by an entirely different company. We love those Spider-Man movies that Raimi is responsible for, bringing us that vision. You've got some Blade movies that are coming out right around the time, you know. So you figure maybe we do have something here, but Marvel Studios decides we're going to go to Merrill Lynch, big financial institution at the time, borrow $500 million. This is a bet that if they lost, they would have gone bankrupt, and all those characters would be owned by the insurance industry. And we'd be watching Merrill Lynch commercials for car insurance starring Spider-Man, right? If things had gone another way in an alternate universe, man, it's really, really incredible to think about the type of risky move that they made with this universe. I just want to get your take on what is the enduring appeal of this movie? What do you think makes it work so well?
Well, I mean, for starters, Marvel isn't unfamiliar with bankruptcy, right? They've had their
Right.
financial issues over the years. um, but I, I, I mean, I think the biggest thing that just keeps people coming back to this movie, and I don't think it can get said enough. As many other similar characters that try to, you know, feel the same vibe or feel the same void. But Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark just hit every button. He was such a breath of fresh air for a hero, for a superhero especially, where he wasn't stoic, he wasn't this, strong silent type. He was erratic, and he was sarcastic, and he had a bit of an edge to him, and he would do things if he thought they were right, whether or not anyone else thought they were right. And he said a lot of things that he felt, even if it was inappropriate and potentially ruined relationships and things like that. And I just think that kind of a character it, it was exciting to watch. Just super fun to watch. He cracks jokes 1 second, the next he's like working on some device. So what's that device? It's a piece of an arm that he's going to shoot people with later in the movie. Like it's just crazy the just the different aspects to this character that you just see in that first film. And I really think that was the biggest, most complete like draw for this film, and why why they still check into the MCU. It's why there's such a big pop whenever they announce Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
just because they love him as Iron Man. They love Robert Downey Jr. as a person now because of his character in this film and the subsequent, however many appearances he made. I
Right.
just really think that's the biggest draw here. And then there's so many other things that are just done so well that it makes a total package that you can come back to and be entertained by, countless times over. I mean, there's with the just a little sidebar, like I found a lot of comedies, they not necessarily. I'll say a lot of average comedies will diminish on a rewatch because you know when the jokes are coming. But a
Right.
lot of the best comedies, they're just so well written that it doesn't matter. I'll laugh at it a million times. I'll laugh at it. A good fart joke is going to be funny on my deathbed. It's going to be hilarious. It's what I mean. It's just I don't know. It's just some things are done so well, you can keep going back to that well, for lack of a better word. It doesn't
Right.
dry up. And I think this first film pretty well accomplishes that, at least as far as a foundational start for this is a new elevation for superhero movies at the time that they continued to grow on as they built this thing moving forward. And I just think every time you look back at it, it's just so impressive that they managed to hit such a big home run right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And it obviously worked for him because 30 films later, but also it got
Right.
them a huge head start on this phase one. You know what I mean? Like they did so good here that even though I and Grandmaster really enjoy the Incredible Hulk, there's a lot of people who that movie is still like in their least favorite MCU films, and I'd even say that like the Iron Man sequels are a little spotty, and the Thor solo film. But whenever it comes back down to the Avengers film later on, which we'll get to, I don't want to get too far down the road, but this bought them a lot of time in that
Yeah.
phase one. I think this character and just the promise that this film makes bought them a lot of breathing room to move through the next several films. Um, and I think that final scene with the Avengers Initiative one, I can tell you, I was giddy. I don't remember if I knew Samuel Jackson was going to be in the movie or what the deal was there, but I had read some Ultimate comics, and if you know anything about the Ultimate comic line, Nick Fury. They turned him from a white guy with an eye patch to a black guy with an eye patch, and they modeled his art after
After.
Samuel
Yeah.
Jackson. So you're literally seeing like an actor, uh, however you want to say it, like inspire comic art, and
Right.
now you're seeing that actor get to play that comic character in live action. Like it was a really cool, like big circular moment, and then just to hear the Avengers are going to be a thing coming up. Like you didn't know what that meant exactly, or how they were going to tie it all together, but that was like
Yeah. It did feel like a promise,
chef's
though.
kiss. Yeah, oh, it was a huge promise, and it was a chef's kiss of a send off, and something that you know there's some at the time. This is before all the everyone tried to build their big
We
multifaceted
take that for
shared
granted.
universes. This was this. I mean, obviously, like Abbott and Costello did, and like the Universal monsters and stuff like that. But that was a different breed of animal. I think a different uh, thing to
Yep.
tackle. This one
You,
was a little
you,
bit different.
yeah, you are
So
not wrong, sir. And I think you've really hit upon it. And I think you touched on something in terms of Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. I also want to add not just his humor, not just the charm, but he also does the dramatic stuff really well. 50% of why
absolutely.
that movie works is Robert Downey Jr. And I think we owe him a huge debt of gratitude in terms of how things have turned out to date. Um, Thank you, Murph, for that incredible deep dive and that insight into the film. I want to go on to my next champion to get their notes, but before I do, Grandmaster, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, correct. Two things. One, the major cinematic universe with multiple crossovers is Star Trek. That was happening before the MCU. So I will always defend that franchise. Sorry. And second of all, yes, I have love for the Incredible Hulk, but it's also still in one of my least favorite MCU films. So
Indeed, indeed.
two things can be true at the same time. Uh,
Yes.
and now I stop yapping again. I give the floor back to you.
No, no, I think that was incredibly insightful, and we in America have that lesson to learn about two things being true at the same time. So we look to the lowlands for insight. That being said, moving on to Loki's mom. I want to talk to you about your feelings on this film. What is it that stands out in your mind that makes this movie work as well as it does? I think we've talked about Robert Downey Jr.'s part in it. We talked about how this balances drama and humor. We've talked a lot about a lot of different aspects of the film, but I want to hear your take on it. What do you think?
Well, I think as what um, why this particular movie landed the way it did, and I guess it opened in 2008. And we had sort of this was like 8 years after 9/11, or 7 years, and of course we've been two wars going on and over in the Middle East itself. Where the story sort of opens. So it was very connected to what was going on at the time. I think Tony represented the or represents the military industrial complex. He, I think he is an idealized character of whom we would wish these men and these some women and whatnot who are in these positions of power, control such great amounts of wealth, have such influence, could be as human as Tony Stark was forced to be once he was got a taste of his own medicine. His own it was his own munitions that put him in the spot he was in that cave, and it was his own ability to think his way out of the situation, his genius that got him out of there. But he still had to come to terms with who he was and what his company
Yeah.
was and everything.
I think there's a redemption arc that we need to talk about that's really powerful in the film. And
But
I am sorry to interrupt you, but yes, you were crystallizing on an idea that I also wanted to bring up, but please continue.
um, well, I've lost my train of thought now. But anyway,
It happens. Don't worry about it. But yeah, we're talking about redemption. We're talking about a guy who realizes that he might have been maybe on the wrong side of an argument, or that he wants to change how he's been doing business for a while. Do you think that that really?
he realized he actually saw himself for what he was. He had been brought up in this whole, and as we find out down the road, he's been lied to a lot. That's kind of one of the themes. And later on, in Thor, Loki finds out he's been lied to a lot. He was raised in deception, and I think Tony Stark has to come to terms with that, along with the stress, along with finding out that his father's closest associate, Obadiah, is really stabbing him in the back. um, I don't in real life, I don't think he really could take all that stress and all that a change and all that realization. It would destroy most people. But Tony Stark is an Iron Man. It did not destroy him. So in a sense, his armor becomes that he's going to take his technology and then he's going to use it for something else. He's going to use it to fight crime or to save the world or whatever it is, that we wish these guys would do. Right now we've got folks who are not looking out for us; they're looking out for their own self-interest. I think that was what we love about Tony Stark and about that character. He was willing to change himself radically and change the world because of it, and I think that's why it landed.
Yeah, the change starts from within, and you're right. He is able to change the world when he changes his perspective and dons that suit of armor, and brings us this new vision of altruism, just like we love superheroes for in general.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Any other notes you want to share with us, Loki's mom, or?
Yeah, well, you're talking a little bit about the continuity of the story, and like you say, a lot of the Marvel and of course X-Men and all that. It was kind of all over the place, patchworky. Some of it worked, most of it didn't. I think in this case we had Kevin Feige and Stan Lee. I think they were very much a partnership there. I think Stan had found someone in Kevin who could really get what he wanted put out there, because he, bless his heart, Stan had up and down. He has struggled with that for generations, and is certainly, while he's not necessarily the creator of the comic book, he was born into it, as it were. I think it was a family business, but yeah, he's really like the guiding spirit. He's the all father of Marvel Comics, and I think he really this is one of the reasons why it's so cohesive going forward, the saga and everything, because they even if they didn't know what the end game was going to be themselves when they first started writing it, they knew that they were progressing toward a goal of some kind.
Yeah.
And I think that's another aspect that should be brought out, that why it has made it so successful. And certainly Iron Man and the whole like you say, if that movie hadn't hit, then it would have been done dead in the water at that point. Yeah, they all partners in that film, including the writers, John Favreau, uh, all the actors, Jeff Bridges. Gwyneth Paltrow, everybody just really put their best into it, and it shows.
Yes, absolutely. I think you have summed up incredibly well what makes this film work from a dramatic perspective, including the redemption arc, including the great work done by the supporting cast. As always, Loki's mom, I want to thank you for your commentary. And I'd like to take this opportunity to move on to our last champion. You've been waiting in the wings, Taylor, patiently to talk about this. And I have a couple of questions for you. We've obviously discussed a lot about this particular film, and we might have left nothing on the table for you to talk about. But I know that you and I share a love for the sort of grounded visual effects that this film brought to the table. And I really want to unpack those with you and get any other thoughts that you might have about this film and your deep dive.
Yeah, well, this MCU thing seems to be working out pretty good so far. So I guess they started on the right foot there with Iron Man. Um, the greatest thing about this is, Kevin Feige had worked with Marvel products leading up to this. He worked on the X-Men movies and others, and you just know that he had this incredible love and knowledge for these characters in this universe. And he was able to do what all of us just dream of, and that was he was able to put his head canon on the big screen. He must have been thinking about this for years before he was able to actually uh, see it through, and then he was able to see it through. And he started with Iron Man, and as you mentioned, you know, the Marvel Studios was writing on this, and they were smart enough to say, "Okay, this is our one shot. We're gonna swing for the fences. We are not gonna test the waters with a standalone movie that we can make sequels to
Right.
later on, and we can make spin-offs to later on if it works out." No, they said we're making a shared cinematic universe, which a phrase that didn't exist at the time. I don't think they invented it, and they said we're going to do this. It's all or nothing. Sydney or the Bush, whatever the phrase is, uh, we're gonna do it. And they got the best people together, and they cobbled together this product, which is just beautifully balanced. The art, the science, and the business of making movies, and it was all done extremely well, extremely carefully. The direction, the writing, the acting, the marketing, uh, the appeal to who on the business side, they knew they had to appeal to a wide audience, not just the people that had gone to see Elektra in the theater. There weren't enough of that, right? Not
Right.
just the people who went to see Ghost Rider because they like Nicolas Cage. No, they had to cast a wide net, and they probably knew that this first movie wasn't going to be $1 billion or anything like that, but they thought it would make an impression, and it would cause word of mouth. It would get people talking, and it would bring people in for the next movie and the next movie. So the fact that they sprinkled in all the indications of a wider universe going on, Shield. Yes, the story was ripped from the headlines. It was a terrorist group in Afghanistan, but this terrorist group in Afghanistan called themselves the Ten Rings. And then, of
Right.
course, with the scene at the end where Nick Fury, which I almost fainted in the theater when he said the Avengers Initiative. I'm like, oh my god, I have to go and find my Avengers comics from the 1970s and read them all again right now. But not only that, but he also said, "You think you're the only hero out there? No, there's
Right.
others." And he just knew that this guy, Samuel L. Jackson, was about to make something big happen. And that's all I can say. And as far as like the visual effects go, like I said, and as I think it was Merv said earlier, they started making this very tangible, very much of our world. And the visual effects reflect that too. It just felt like you could feel the weight of this suit.
Right.
Hear the steps as he's walking, kind of like they had done, in the '80s with RoboCop. You could just feel the weight of this thing, and it moved like a suit. It didn't move like Spider-Man. It moved like a guy in a metal suit, a very high-tech, very functional metal suit, but it was still like a metal suit. And of course, they showed us just enough of the process of creating and building this thing, and the testing and the trial and error to bring it all together. So, I mean, what else can you say about it? Do you have
Yeah.
another specific question for me?
It's well, I think I think what makes this work with the visual effects is that combination of there's a lot of computer generated work in it. You see
Yes,
Stark being put together in a gantry. It just looks like wow, it's so well thought out, so well executed. Like you said, you feel the weight, you hear metal clanking. Sound editing and sound design really needs a lot of credit on this film. But for as many computer driven shots as you see, there's also a lot of practical stuff. The Mark One armor is a patchwork of metal stuff that prop masters, had to put together and cobble together. It's physical, it's real. And we also know that some of the Ironmonger work at the end was also a large animatronic puppet that got some visual effects, some touch-ups and such. But I think the visual effects team really deserves probably the other half of the credit that could go to this film for creating just a credible vision of what this superhero is, and not something that just looked really janky that could have failed from jump.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, but
And then you
yeah,
put an
yeah. I
actor in it who can actually sell it, and
Right,
you give that actor the tools. You give that actor the one, the script, which is fantastic, but then the ability to ad lib to a degree, to deliver his lines in such a ways to give the character that personality. And then, of course, they found a way around one of the age old problems of superhero stories is your hero, your star, has got a mask over his face the whole time. So
right.
how does he act? Well, they created that great shot of his head inside the mask, his face inside the
Yes,
mask, and you could see the reflections of the digital readouts and stuff, the information that was being fed to him by the AI as he was flying around in the suit, which
yeah,
wasn't completely new. They had done a very similar shot in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the guy was sitting in front of the computer screen and you could see the reflections of the screen on his face. But again, they adapted that for this purpose, and it just worked out great.
right. Yeah, good catch on good call in terms of when they had done this before. I completely forgot about that. But even though it wasn't the most innovative thing in the world, you're absolutely right about the sort of HUD acting, the heads up display. And that's just an actor with a camera pointed at their face doing these reactions, trying to show the exhilaration of a first flight, that they're at a high altitude. Again, Downey Jr. really deserves an incredible amount of credit for selling this concept on every single level. As much as it is grounded, Iron Man is still a very high concept idea. So, but I think we've done it, guys. I think we have dissected, we've disassembled, that's a better term. Iron Man 2008. Not that our show is over just yet. We still have one more task to take care of before the conclusion of the show, and that's we're going to go around the table and we're going to attempt to give Iron Man 2008 a grade. Lokismom, I'm going to start with you on a 1 to 10 scale. Where does Iron Man fall for you?
I'm going to give it a 9.
Outstanding. Without even a moment's hesitation. Audience members, moving on. Thank you for that. And moving on to Grandmaster, your grade for Iron Man.
I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10, and that's only because I know what's more to come. I need some space.
You need a little bit of headroom. A
Yes,
wise choice, my friend. A wise choice in terms of grading. Merv, we're going to go to you. Your grade 1 to 10.
I'm going to go 7 for a lot of the same reasons. At the time this movie came out, it'd probably be a 9, but only because the scale only goes up to 10 has it moved down.
Indeed. Well, you can always turn the controller up to 11. We know some folks in Britain who did
oh,
that.
I keep that right for certain few movies that are coming, but
Indeed, indeed. All right. Last but certainly not least, Taylor, we need your grade.
Well, you have to factor in all of the flaws, and you have to compare it to the superior products that came afterward, like the DCEU, and
Yes.
taking that all into account, 10.
There you have it. There
we
you
didn't
have it
see that
from the
coming.
right. We didn't see that coming at all from the fan without fear. Iron Man 2008 gets a perfect 10. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have had as much fun as I have had here with the champions, taking apart Iron Man and then reassembling it. It's a groundbreaking film. And I want to thank my incredible panel for joining me on the show today: Taylor, Grandmaster, Merv, and Lokismom, for all the insights and all the enthusiasm. You've all proven yourselves worthy today. I don't know why I felt like throwing in a Thor pun, but sure. Before we power it down, though,
I think we smashed
let
it.
indeed we smashed it. Thank you, sir, for saving me there. But before we power it down, let's not forget that this is just the beginning of our journey through the Infinity Saga. So next time we are going to be moving on to the next film in the IF series, and this is going to be an ongoing series where we do all of the films in the MCU up to Endgame. So please get suited up and be ready for action on our next episode, which will be The Incredible Hulk. Now, if you have enjoyed today's discussion, please remember that our community on Sakar is growing, and you can check us out at sakar.freeforms.net. We'd love to see you there, and we'd even love to see you here down in the comments or even participating in the discussion. That is also a possibility as well. You know the deal in terms of our social platforms. We're everywhere: Facebook, X, Instagram, etc., etc. And please don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. It really helps the show out a lot. So this is Lord Deathman. I have been Lord Deathman and always will. And I am signing us off for the podcast of champions. Until next time, remember, we are all Iron Man.